My name is Mia, and for 2 years I lived in a house I owned, under a roof I paid for, while my own sister treated me like a beggar at her table. It started small. It always does. Our parents died within 8 months of each other. My father from a heart attack, my mother from grief, though the doctors called it something else. I was 26. My sister Renee was 31, married to a quiet, tired-looking man named Dale, and already halfway through convincing herself that everything our parents built belonged to her by default, simply because she was older, louder, and better at making people feel guilty. What Renee didn't know, what nobody outside a locked filing cabinet and one very careful lawyer knew, was that 6 months before my father died, he'd transferred the house into my name. Quietly. Deliberately. He sat me down in his study one evening, tapping his pen against a folder, and said, "Your sister will fight you for everything, Mia. I'm not leaving her the house, and I'm leaving her nothing to fight over." I didn't understand him then. I thought he was being harsh. I thought grief was making him paranoid. I understand him perfectly now. After the funerals, Renee assumed control of the house the way she assumed control of everything without asking. She redecorated the living room. She told Dale where to park. She told me, gently at first, that it made more sense for her to manage things since she was the eldest. I let it happen because I was drowning in my own grief and because some small, foolish part of me still wanted my sister to love me the way sisters are supposed to. I didn't tell her the house was mine. I don't fully know why, even now. Maybe I wanted to see who she'd be without that piece of leverage. Maybe some part of me already sensed I'd need the truth later, sharp and unused, like a knife kept in a drawer for the day I'd actually need to cut something. The first 6 months were almost peaceful. Then the money talk began. It started as jokes. "Must be nice not having a mortgage to worry about," Renee would say, not knowing she was the one without a mortgage. Then it became requests. I should chip in for groceries, for the electric bill, for the upkeep of a house she believed was hers. I paid. Of course I paid. It was easier than arguing, and honestly, I still loved her, even as the version of her I remembered started disappearing behind someone colder. By the 1-year mark, I was covering almost every bill in a house that legally couldn't be taken from me. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself grief makes people ugly for a while, and Renee would come back to herself eventually. She didn't. The night everything changed started like any other Sunday dinner. Renee had invited her in-laws, a cousin from out of town, and 2 of her friends from the gym, people I barely knew, sitting around a table in a home I owned, eating food I had, in fact, paid for that week, since Renee had forgotten to transfer me the money for groceries again. I remember reaching for a second helping of the roast chicken. I remember Renee's eyes flicking toward my plate the way they always did lately, calculating, resentful. And then she said it, loud enough for the whole table to hear, with that syrupy smile she used when she wanted to humiliate someone while looking like the reasonable one. "Mia, sweetie, maybe slow down a little on seconds. It's not really fair, is it? You haven't put in a single penny toward this dinner." The table went quiet in that specific way tables go quiet, when everyone senses blood in the water, but doesn't want to be the one to point it out. I felt my face go hot. Not from embarrassment, from something colder. Something that had been simmering for 2 years finally reaching a full, silent boil. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just smiled, put my fork down, and said, "You're right, Renee. I should probably pay my fair share from now on." She looked almost disappointed that I hadn't fought back. She wanted a scene. She wanted to be the wounded party in front of an audience. Instead, I gave her something far more dangerous: agreement. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my car in the driveway of my own house and made 2 phone calls. The first was to my father's old lawyer, Mr. Halbrook, a soft-spoken man in his 60s who had drafted the property transfer years ago and had been waiting, I think, for the day I'd finally need him. He confirmed what I already knew: the deed, the taxes, every legal document tied to that house had my name on it, and only my name. Renee's name appeared nowhere, not once, not as an owner, not as a co-signer, not even as an emergency contact on the insurance policy. "Your father was very deliberate about this, Mia," Halbrook said. "He told me your sister would try to take what wasn't hers. He wanted you protected." The second call was to Dale. I want to be clear. I didn't call Dale to conspire against my sister out of spite. I called him because over the past year, in small, unguarded moments, he'd started looking at me like someone drowning looks at a life raft. He'd started apologizing for things Renee said, quietly, when she wasn't in the room. He'd started staying late at the garage some nights, just to avoid coming home to her mood swings. Dale answered on the second ring, his voice low, like he already sensed something was shifting. I asked him one question. "Dale, has Renee ever told you the house is in your names? Both of yours?" There was a long pause. "She said it's ours. Family house, left to both of you, but she's been handling it since you're not good with paperwork," she says. I laughed, and it wasn't a kind laugh. "Renee doesn't own a single brick of this house, Dale. I do. I've owned it since before our father died." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about how much Dale had been kept in the dark, too. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't confront Renee. I built a case. I pulled every bill I'd quietly paid for 18 months, receipts, bank transfers, screenshots of texts where Renee had asked me for my share, never once mentioning that the entire house, every wall and window, was already legally mine. I gathered the property deed. I gathered the tax documents, all in my name, dated years back. I gathered a short, unremarkable voice memo from that Sunday dinner, recorded on my phone in my pocket. The moment Renee told the whole table I hadn't contributed a penny. Suspense doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like a woman quietly organizing folders while smiling at family dinners, waiting for the right night. That right night came 3 weeks later, when Renee, emboldened by what she thought was my surrender, decided to invite the entire family over again. Aunts, uncles, even our grandmother, who was 82 and sharp as broken glass, for what Renee called a house planning dinner. I later learned through Dale that Renee intended to announce that she and Dale were planning to sell her house within the year and move somewhere bigger, somewhere without me in it. She was going to do it in front of everyone, the same way she'd humiliated me over the roast chicken. So I'd have no room to object without looking petty in front of family. She had no idea I already knew. I arrived at that dinner with a manila folder tucked into my bag like a loaded gun. Renee stood at the head of the table, the table in the dining room of the house I owned, and made her announcement with practiced warmth, thanking everyone for their support since Mom and Dad passed, saying how she and Dale had decided it was time to sell the family home and start fresh, how she hoped everyone would understand. I let her finish. I let the applause and murmured congratulations settle. Then I stood up. "Before we get too excited about selling my house," I said, calm, almost gentle, "I think everyone should see something." I slid copies of the deed down the table. I placed the tax documents beside my grandmother's plate. I set my phone down and played 11 seconds of audio. Renee's voice, bright and cruel, telling me I hadn't earned the right to eat food in a house that had never, not for one single day, belonged to her. The silence this time was different. It wasn't polite. It was the silence of a room recalculating everything it thought it understood about two sisters. Renee's face went through 4 colors before she found words. "That's not... Dad wouldn't... You're lying." But Mr. Halbrook, who I'd quietly invited that evening under the guise of helping settle some paperwork, stepped forward with his own copies, his own confirmation, his own calm, devastating voice explaining that the property had been solely in my name for over 2 years, a decision our father made deliberately and irreversibly. I watched my grandmother's face harden as she looked at Renee. I watched aunts who'd praised Renee's responsibility all night suddenly go quiet, with the specific disappointment reserved for people who've been caught performing kindness they never actually felt. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I simply said, "You told me I hadn't earned the right to eat in your house, Renee. I'd like you to know whose house you've actually been eating in for 2 years. And since we're discussing contributions, I have records of every bill I've paid alone since Dad died, while you told everyone I was a burden." Dale didn't defend her. That, more than anything, seemed to break something in Renee, watching her own husband stay silent, his eyes down, already halfway gone from a marriage built on borrowed comfort. Renee left that night before dessert was served. She moved out 3 weeks later, quietly, with far less noise than she'd made humiliating me at that dinner table. Dale stayed a little longer, then moved out too, the marriage unable to survive the shape of who Renee really was once the mask came off. I still live in that house. My house. I cook dinner most Sundays now, sometimes for friends, sometimes for Dale, who's become, strangely, one of the few family members who still checks on me, guilt-ridden and quietly grateful I never asked him to choose a side before he was ready to see clearly. Renee and I don't speak, not out of cruelty. I simply stopped waiting for an apology I finally understood would never come. Sometimes revenge isn't a scream. Sometimes it's a folder of quiet, patient paperwork sitting untouched for 2 years, waiting for someone to say exactly the wrong thing at exactly the right table. She said I hadn't earned my place at that dinner. She just didn't know the whole house had been mine to give her, the entire time.